everyone, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I'm Vanessa and I make lots of bookish and writing related content. So if that's something you're into, stick around and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite tropes, the enemies to lovers trope, and recommending some books that use this trope. So if you're not familiar with this trope, the enemies to lovers trope is basically how it sounds. It's when your main character and love interest start off as enemies, or at the very least, they don't like each other. They don't necessarily have to be sworn enemies, but they usually don't like each other in the beginning. But then over time, they connect and develop a relationship, and it turns into being lovers. This is actually one of my favorite tropes to read and write about, so let's talk about some books. So the first one on the list is Romeo Redeemed by Stacey J. This is the sequel to Juliet Immortal. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but with a twist. One where Romeo and Juliet are sworn enemies. Although that's not where the enemies to lovers trope comes in with this duology. It's weird in a way, and kind of interesting, but I can't really say much more without getting into some major spoilers. So just know, if you like enemies to lovers trope, then Romeo Redeemed would be a good one to check out. But do be aware that the first book, Juliet Immortal, is not an enemies to lovers trope. Next on this list is A Wicked Thing duology by Rhiannon Thomas. This one is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. So 100 years after the curse, Aurora is finally awakened, but everyone she knew is gone and her kingdom is left broken. So now she's trying to figure out how to navigate this world she's woken up to and learn about her kingdom, and pretty much has to make the decision whether or not to marry her prince, the guy who woke her up. Now, in this duology, we also meet another character named Finnegan. And of course, at first, Aurora doesn't like him, doesn't want anything to do with him at all. But seeing how this is enemies to lovers trope, we all know where this is going. I read this duology a few years ago, but the one thing I remember loving was the banter between Aurora and Finn. They have this cute banter that they do sometimes, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like the enemies to lovers trope. It's because sometimes we get characters where we can see this cute little banter back and forth between them. And that's kind of what we get in this duology as well. So I really liked it. Next on this list is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Now, if you've been on BookTube for any length of time, you've probably heard all about the Throne of Glass series, Sarah J. Maas, so I don't think I really need to get into explaining it. If you haven't read the series yet, you're probably not going to, because maybe it doesn't sound interesting to you, and that's fine. There are some people which the series doesn't sound interesting or appealing at all to them, or they don't like phase stories, and that's totally fine. But for the small minority of people that may be out there who have not read this series yet, but still want to, and it's on your TBR, what are you waiting for? This is one of my all-time favorite series, and there's so many things to love about it, like enemies to lovers trope, check. Badass assassins, check. Fantasy setting, lots of actions, and great characters, and even a great villain, check, check, and double check. So if this book is still sitting on your TBR shelf in 2021, it's time. Pick it up. It's time to read it. The next series on this list is another duology, and that is The Wrath and the Dawn duology by Renee Ahdieh. So in this story, each day, Prince Khalid marries a different girl, and by the next morning has her killed, beheaded. Our main character, Shazi, had a best friend who the prince married and then subsequently killed the next day. So she ends up volunteering to marry the prince um, in order to get close to him and try to get revenge for what he did to her best friend. Of course, since we're talking about the enemies to lovers trope today, you can probably guess how well her revenge plan went. This duology actually took me by surprise, and I ended up loving it way more than I thought I would. If you love the enemies to lovers trope, this is one you definitely need to check out. The next book on this list is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kamir. Now, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's the first book in the Cursebreaker series. I have a full review of this book that I will leave linked down below. I think I have reviews for a couple of these books, which I will leave all linked down below in the description. I read this one back in 2019 when it came out, and I loved it. It became a favorite of mine in 2019. And then I read the second book last year when it came out, and again, loved it. Became a favorite of mine in 2020. So, really loved this series. But the first one definitely has, the whole enemies to lovers trope again. Not so much the second book, but the first one does. The characters are amazing. Harper, our main character, is amazing, and I love her dynamic in her relationship with Prince Ren and also with Gray. I thought it was a pretty cool and interesting dynamic with the three of them, but I really love her and Ren together. And there are actually two things that I love about the romance in this book. One is that it's an enemies to lovers trope. So at first, Harper wants absolutely nothing to do with Ren, but eventually they develop a friendship and it starts turning into more. So there's that I love. But then the second thing about this romance that I love is that it's a slow burn. Their relationship progresses and they become friends, and you can see the potential for something more, but they don't get to, at least in Harper's case, she doesn't get to that point of actually declaring she's in love with Ren. Um, and so it's a very slow burn, and you know she's gonna get there eventually. You can see where it's headed, but it's not instantaneous, which I feel like that's one of the reasons why I love the enemies to lovers trope so much, is it helps avoid that insta love that we see in a lot of YA, which can be annoying. But yeah, it slows the progression of the relationship, because you're not gonna go, obviously you're not gonna go from hating someone to loving them the next minute. It takes time to slowly let go of that dislike and start to come around and develop a friendship, and then eventually have it be more. So, A Curse So Dark and Lonely has enemies to lovers trope, a slow burn romance. It's perfect, at least to me. I love it. Definitely recommend. Now, the last book on this list is not out and available yet, and that is because it's my own story, The As A Witches. This is not the actual cover of the book. This is a mock cover I made on Canva, so it's just temporary. Anyway, since I love this trope, of course I had to include it in my own story. So in this story, my main character, Becca, is a witch, and our love interest, Charles, is actually a vampire. So already the odds are kind of stacked against them, because in my world, witches were taught that all vampires are evil and they need to protect humanity and others from vampires. And of course, there are other creatures, supernatural creatures in this world that they need to protect humanity from, but vampires happen to be one of them. So, of course, dating a vampire is a huge no-no. So, with my story, I kind of get three things that I love with this. We get the forbidden love trope, the enemies to lovers trope, and we also get a slow burn, because Becca and Charles's relationship is going to develop very, very slowly over time. Charles has nothing against Becca to begin with, but Becca is very distrustful of him, because of one, how she was taught to believe about vampires, but then also because of certain circumstances that happen with him in the beginning of the book. So she's very distrustful, and she's like, no, this not happening. But yeah, it's gonna be a very slow burn. They've also got some pretty cute banter going on between them in this series. So, again, all the things that I love in a romance. So, yeah. And not to confuse anyone or give anyone the wrong impression, my story is not a romance story. The romance is just a subplot of the story. It's a paranormal story, and it's about, a girl named Becca who's a witch, and she is basically investigating her parents' death, their murder, and she believes a certain demon killed them, and she's basically trying to find them and get answers. But then a mysterious vampire comes into town and kind of shakes things up, starts hunting and killing people in town. And so Becca is, her attention is now kind of diverted to try to stop this vampire before they hurt anyone else. So that's the main plot of the story, and then the romance is kind of like a subplot underneath. I'm hoping to have the story out by the fall of this year. I don't have a set date for it yet, but my goal is the fall. So if you guys love the enemies to lovers trope, then this will be one series you'll want to put on your TBR. So that's it for this video today. Those are my enemies to lovers book recommendations. Let me know in the comments below what are some of your favorite enemies to lovers books, or what is your favorite trope to see in books. Leave me a comment below and let me know. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I post new videos every other Thursday, and normally I'd have a new video for you guys, so in 2 weeks, but I'm actually doing something a little bit different and special. This year, one of the things I really wanted to try to do was do a live stream on YouTube. I've never done a live stream before. So, in 2 weeks, instead of getting a normal pre-recorded video, I am going to be doing my first ever live stream. I am going to be hosting writing slash productivity sprints on my channel. So if you want to hang out and get some writing done or any other work done, come join me for that live spring in 2 weeks on the 21st at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And yeah, I think it'll be fun. So until next time, see you guys. Bye.